We are the Catalan Independentist Resistance, and you are listening to a new update from Radio Hadrian in Free Catalonia.
Alright, good afternoon, bona tarda, and welcome to Radio Hadrian, week 3. What do you think about this? The Scottish independence movement is heavily infiltrated by British secret services, British intelligence. A crazy idea? Or a logical idea? When I put this suggestion to people, I'm greeted with derision, ridicule, suggestions that I need to get psychiatric help, that I'm a conspiracy theorist, I read too many spy stories, I watch too many James Bond films, the list goes on. Occasionally I hear, yes, but of course they are. Of course secret services are involved. But why? Why would the UK employ secret services in the Scottish independence movement? For this reason. The UK needs Scotland more than Scotland needs the UK. And if you want to hold on to something badly enough, you would do anything possible to hold on to that, and the UK would go to any length to hold on to Scotland. Okay, what does the UK get out of Scotland? It gets two things. It gets revenue and it has the use of resources, both of which would be either not available or negotiable in an independent Scotland. Negotiable because England would be a trading partner. Revenue. Let's start with the most obvious one, is oil. Everybody knows Scotland has oil and the revenue goes to the UK, which generously, or not so generously, gives back some of the money to Scotland in the form of the Barnett formula. It's widely accepted that Scotland produces much more money for the Barnett formula than it gets out of the Barnett formula. Okay, what's next? Whiskey. The world knows about Scotch Whiskey. To the UK government, whiskey is worth £100 billion a year. £135 a second. A second. It brings in a quarter of the UK's total food and drink export revenue. One product brings in a quarter of that revenue. That's something you would want to hold on to. Fish. Scotland has a long and strong fishing history. Very strong, very long. It goes back many, many centuries. Scotland produces 60% of the UK's total fishing catch. Now, if that was eaten in the UK, it wouldn't bring in export revenue, but it's not all eaten in the UK. The majority of it is exported. And it's not just exported fresh. For example, the fish markets here in Catalonia and in the rest of Spain, it's also exported to faraway places in Asia to be processed and then returned back over here as a processed product, a frozen product. Scotland used to be a country where fish was eaten on a very regular basis. It was a fishing country like most Scandinavian countries are, and yet most of our fish leaves the country. There are other exports that also produce large incomes for the UK government. Scotch beef, Scotch lamb, and I say Scotch, not Scottish, because the product which is produced in Scotland 100% is known as Scotch beef and Scotch lamb, not Scottish, Scotch. And Scotch beef and Scotch lamb are amongst the best in the world. Aberdeen beef, Aberdeen Angus beef, is renowned the world over for its incredible quality. The export market for these products is huge. Russia, Singapore, the USA, other parts of Southeast Asia all have an insatiable appetite for Scotch beef. But thinking about lamb, now any Scots person knows about sheep. Scotland is a country which probably has more sheep than people. And yet, how many Scots people listening to this can say they can afford to eat lamb on a regular basis? When I was growing up, we ate lamb every week. And now when I look at the prices in the supermarket, it is not destined for the average person anymore. It's priced itself out of the market. And that's wrong. That is very wrong. Okay, then we've got resources. Scotland is a country with immense natural beauty. It is probably one of the most beautiful countries in the world. I could say it is the most beautiful country in the world, but I've travelled a lot and I can tell you that there are other countries that are beautiful too. However, Scotland is there at the top. It's in the top rank. That natural beauty is abused tremendously. But I can't necessarily say that it's abused just by the UK government, because I think our own Scottish government has some responsibility in not protecting Scotland's land. And the announcement has yet to be made about fracking, whether Energy Minister Paul Wheelhouse will allow fracking to go ahead or not. I sincerely hope he does not, but energy companies have deep pockets and powerful mouths. So, at the moment, Scotland's resources that are of use to the UK. We have Trident. The Trident deterrent, based at Fastlane on the River Clyde, 50 miles from the centre of Glasgow, 50 miles from the biggest city, the biggest centre of population in Scotland. Sure, it provides jobs, but at what price does it provide jobs? I grew up next to Hunterston Power Station, also on the Clyde. When that was built, local people were assured there would be lots of safety checks, lots of maintenance, everything would be all fine. And that's not the case. As a local from that area of Ayrshire, I know so many people who've worked at Hunterston and who have given accounts of malpractices, nuclear leaks, and horror stories that the population was sold when Hunterston was built in the late 60s. My own uncle was an electrician. He was sent to work with, I can't remember what they were called. He was an electrician with, it wasn't called Scottish Power back then. It was, the Scottish Electricity Company, I think. Somebody might correct me on that. And he was sent to work at Hunterston, and he refused. He walked out and he quit his job because of the practices he saw. So when they tell us that checks and balances are in place for Trident, as they also will with fracking, if they let it go ahead, it's nonsense. It's absolute nonsense. Trident is there because of an agreement with the UK and the US governments and NATO. Military training. Scotland is a place, for those of you who don't know Scotland, those of you who are unfamiliar with its landscape, it has a lot of natural spaces, open natural spaces that are very mountainous and once housed people, but now tend to be open spaces with virtually nobody living there, no inhabitants. And what happens in these places is that the British military use them for training exercises. So the Air Force uses Scotland's airspace and the Army uses Scotland's land space. And of course, England being so overpopulated is not an option because there are too many people there. Tourism. I think tourism also brings in money to Scottish people too, so I probably would put that one aside. Did you know you can buy an island in Scotland? So if anybody out there listening has got a few thousand up to a few million pounds to spare, Google buy an island in Scotland and you will find quite a choice of websites available that will offer you all sorts of islands, from tiny little uninhabited islands to Ailsa Craig on the Clyde. Everything is on the Clyde. Ailsa Craig, an island that I looked out on every morning as I was growing up, and I'm sure many other people listening to this could also identify with that notion. Ailsa Craig is it's like a monolith. It sits halfway between Scotland and Ireland, Northern Ireland, and Ailsa Craig is a bird sanctuary. It's a sanctuary where you can find beautiful puffins and guillemots and other seabirds. Sadly, Ailsa Craig was up for sale a couple of years ago, in 2011, for £2.5 million. It was on the books of a London estate agent. It was one of 97 Scottish islands for sale. I find that sad. It makes me angry that individual people with money to spare can go and buy a part of a country that is struggling to get its self-determination back and struggling to be independent. And that's, yes, it was advertised in Country Life. Country Life is a magazine which, for those of you who don't know it, it's a very glossy magazine. It's been around for many years. And in it you can buy houses which generally don't cost anything under £1 million. It's very much geared to the moneyed classes. It's very upper class, and you can buy Scottish islands through Country Life. Anyway, these are some of the reasons why the UK government desperately want to hold on to Scotland. You can also buy a Scottish castle. You can also buy a Scottish title. You can become a lord, or a laird, as it's known in Scotland. A lot of our land is also used for shooting. Deer, pheasant, grouse. And the majority of those people come from other countries. And when I say other countries, I include the southeast of England. Okay, so reasons why Westminster or the UK government desperately want to hold on to Scotland: our resources and the revenue we bring into them. Okay, so where do the special services come into this? The UK special services, the intelligence services, have their origins way back in World War I, when there were multiple MI somethings. There was MI5, MI6 and other MIs, and they all had their specific reasons for being in existence. Today we have MI5 and we have MI6, and you can actually go to their websites and you can read what they deem to tell you about their operations, or what they deem to tell you. That's the key point. MI6 is the foreign department. MI5 is the domestic department. So in one sense, MI5 is the one that Scotland's independence movement is more associated with. But MI6, the Foreign Department, works very closely with the CIA. MI6 has a reputation for being incredibly more secret than even the CIA. Where does the link with that come in? I'll go into that in a wee bit. So we've got the origins of the British Secret Services, intelligence services, starting back in World War I time. And they had operatives in Russia and in Germany, including one very famous operative who some of you may know is a very famous English writer called Somerset Maugham. He was an MI6 spy. Then they moved into World War II. They were quite active between the wars. So although World War I had finished and World War II hadn't started, MI6 maintained their position. So really that suggests to me that World War I and World War II weren't separate wars. They were actually all part of the same war, and that nothing is an accident when it comes to wars. So we've got World War II, MI6 totally immersed in it, and then the Cold War and the communists. And I grew up in, I have to say in Britain, because it still is Britain, when Reds under the beds and anti-communism was it was a household topic. It was something we all knew about, and I was only a child. The Cold War in the Soviet bloc, or behind the Iron Curtain as we called it, was as much a part of MI6's operation as anything else. Kim Philby was a household name. Kim Philby was an MI6 agent who later was discovered to be a Russian agent. And I say this because it gives you an indication of the cross-infiltration and the type of thing that goes on. And I'll come to that in a wee bit regarding Scotland and the infiltration that takes place in Scotland to prevent independence. Okay, from the Cold War, the end of the Cold War, MI6 have an impressive list of action. The Falklands against Argentina, the Persian Gulf War, the Balkans, and Northern Ireland. Northern Ireland is interesting because MI6 had intimate links with leaders of the IRA and Sinn Féin, who, in the case of what was known as the Irish Troubles, they were the enemy. So you have both sides working together for their own end objective. Okay, the Falklands and Northern Ireland are both places the UK wanted to keep, just like Scotland. They both involved wars, which Scotland hasn't, and both remain in the UK and Northern Ireland, which Scotland will too, if it doesn't get its act together and declare independence. Independence is not going to come through processes and politicians. People are very happy, or not necessarily happy, but very willing to admit that of course the British Secret Services would be involved in the Falklands or World War I, Northern Ireland, but when it comes to Scotland they have this blackout zone that says no, Scottish politics are nice and friendly and that wouldn't happen and don't be ridiculous. And and the next thing you're going to say is Alex Salmond is an MI5 agent. Well, that's not so funny, I have no idea why so many Scots, intelligent people and good people, are so reluctant to accept that the independence movement and the virtually sole independence party might be infiltrated by British intelligence. Okay, I don't know. It's a conundrum. Right. So we have got reasons why the UK will do anything to keep hold of Scotland. We have a history of British intelligence services involved in action to hold on to what the British establishment wants to keep. When it comes to Europe, of course, we have the British royal family with well-known family associations with Nazi Germany. That's a whole other program. When I was researching this, it was interesting to notice how many files I tried to open up online that told me file not available, file unknown, file removed. For example, Forbes.com, September the 11th, 2014, only 7 days before the referendum. There was a secret file that contained information stating Scotland would be a far richer nation if it got independence. That's as much as you can read about that file now, because the file has been removed. Now, if we go back, sorry, I'm jumping about a little bit here, but there is a lot of jumping about in this whole business. If you go back to the end of the Second World War, or more or less the end of the Second World War, 1946 to be exact, an agreement was drawn up between the UK and the USA, between their intelligence services. And that agreement still exists today. It's called the UK-USA Agreement, and it was set up to exclude every other country on earth. It gave exclusive sharing rights of intelligence between the UK and the USA. Later, many years later, it was expanded to include, not surprisingly, 3 British Commonwealth countries: Australia, Canada and New Zealand. So we now have what's called the Group of 5, and this is a little intelligence service group which excludes every other country on earth. If you look this up, you will find links to the page, and then you'll get page not found, file not available. However, I was actually able to read this file a few weeks ago, but now I'm not able to get into it. Okay, is this just my idea? Am I flying solo on this? No, I'm not. There are cases of much better people than me. Margot MacDonald, the late Margot MacDonald, in 1979, in the devolution vote, alleged her election to Westminster was followed by KGB and CIA agents who, posing as journalists, took her out to lunch. In the 70s, Margot MacDonald stated she believed the SNP was infiltrated by MI5 based on the UK's fear of losing oil. Margot also wrote to the UK Secret Services, to MI5, for assurances that they would not interfere in this IndyRef of 2014. And she suggested very strongly that the British Secret Services have people in the SNP, in the leadership of the SNP. Margot was once an SNP MP who followed her own gut instinct and stood up to the SNP. When she stood as an independent candidate, she was expelled from the party. Margaret MacDonald's husband, Jim Sillars, also said that during the 1979 devolution vote, British Secret Services were all over Scotland like a rash. So, why? Someone tell me why British Secret Services would not heavily infiltrate the SNP today to prevent independence. The rigged referendum, the farce of the rigged referendum, is amazing. It is amazing that nobody has questioned it. Not one single SNP MP, apart from Christine Graham, who didn't actually question it, but who said the only way to independence was through UDI. Not one single SNP MP has questioned the farce of the 2014 independence referendum. Why? Because the infiltration of MI5 into the SNP is not at the lower ranks. It's not down at the base where people are still somewhat idealistic and believe that independence is possible through the party. The infiltration is at the top. Now, I do not know who it is. I don't know. Believe me, if I did, I wouldn't be going hell for leather to make this public. I don't know. I suspect who it could be, and it may not be more than one person. And they may not know each other. I'm sure they don't know each other. But you can bet your life the infiltration will be at the highest level, and it will be a smooth operation to make sure no stone is unturned and every angle is covered. Independence is not on the cards for Scotland, not through processes. Westminster will never allow it. And Westminster's relationship with Washington adds another dimension to it, and that is the involvement of the CIA, which included Barack Obama prior to the independence referendum of 2014, who came out against independence. It's not in the interests of the UK, it's not in the interests of the USA. The only way Scotland is going to get independence is through the people. Through the people taking hold of things for themselves, being in control of their own destiny and rising up and declaring independence. Not through processes and referendums and carrots being dangled in front of their noses. As long as the people believe in a party like the SNP who deliver nothing, independence is like as far away as the moon. And one last thing. Margaret MacDonald warned MI5 to stay out of the Scottish independence referendum in 2014. Now, I know I mentioned that a few moments ago, but that's a closing note. She knew what they would be up to. And I wonder if she knew who it was. Who, in the higher levels of the SNP, is working against independence. Food for thought, eh? And on that note, a postscript. Next week, the possibility of a splinter group, a breakaway party. Kenny McGaskill, Tommy Shepherd. Not happy with the way Nicola Sturgeon is conducting things. And the possibility of a breakaway splinter party is no accident. No accident. So, for next week, we'll talk about why a breakaway party run by somebody like Kenny McGaskill could possibly be a reality. There's a lot of people in Scotland crying out for alternative independence party. We don't really have other parties. Here in Catalonia there are many parties and they're always breaking up and reforming. It's constant. In Scotland there is one party. It's a monopoly. You've got the Greens and you've got Solidarity, but they're not real contenders. We need another party, but not a splinter party from disgruntled current SNP MPs. But it's no accident, because let's face it, if the people rise up and form their own party, they might just declare independence. So we need to provide them with a party, courtesy of a breakaway splinter group. See you next week. Thanks and bye.
This is Hadrian Radio, coming to you from Free Catalonia, a KA radio production.
Good night to people listening to the English version of Radio Hadrian. I'm David Rabantos, and I'm gonna dedicate the next minutes to talk about some topics that I hope you'll find interesting. Basically, today I'm gonna talk about Hipercor, which was a big bomb attack that happened in Barcelona in 1997, and that has commemorated its 30th anniversary this week. This anniversary has been marked by very unfortunate comments from Carles Puigdemont, president of Catalonia, which commented that the fight for making a referendum is comparable to the fight against ETA, the armed band that worked in Spain for the last 40 years. And that was very unfortunate, but it's convenient to talk about Carles Puigdemont this week, because most Catalans don't know the dark truths about Carles Puigdemont, and we're gonna tell them about him tonight. Then we're gonna go and talk about one of the biggest weapons of mass destruction, and we're not talking about chemical warfare or the atom bomb. We're talking about the term conspiracy theory and how its use is responsible for millions of deaths all over the world. And finally, I would like to talk about referendums and how referendums have nothing to do with independence or democracy, regardless of what they tell us. So as I said, the first theme today is Hipercor, and I said with utmost respect that we are talking about 19th of June 1987 in the afternoon. In Hipercor is a kind of a big supermarket related to a chain of Corte Inglés, which is the biggest department store chain in Spain, which would translate to the English cut. And well, that day a bomb in the parking lot ended the life of 21 persons and wounded 49 more. And that's the fact, and that's cold fact. And if by any chance any family member of the people who was injured or killed that day, all our feelings of support, because the truth is that they haven't received the support that they deserve. When these things happen, there's always short-term attention, but then after that happens, it's a hard life for a lot of people for the rest of their lives. So this is a call for all the administrations to do the best, whatever is the cause, whoever is the people after the bombing, which is something that, as usual here in Radio Hadrian, we're gonna tell things that you cannot hear in mainstream media or nowhere else. Because the official story tells us on how ETA, the Euskaditas Katasuna, the Basque armband that's supposed to fight for independence of the Basque country, warned 3 times, at least. Once the department store chain, the other Avui, which was a Catalan newspaper, and the police, and there's recordings of that, how they told how there was a bomb and how nobody should move any car from that moment in the parking lot, and that they should evict the place. The police ignored the warning, and the bomb happened, and ETA half-heartedly claimed the attack. So the official story is that ETA put a bomb there, and it severed the life of 21 Catalan people, and 49 more were wounded. Well, that, as it happens, the official truth lots of times is far from the truth, with capital T. We won't go into it today, but in other programs we'll talk about Gladio. Gladio is something which is not a conspiracy theory. It's something that has been confirmed by Italian court, and which was accepted in European Parliament in 1990 after Giulio Andreotti, the Prime Minister of Italy, accepted to the existence of a NATO organized stay-behind network, which was put in place using sometimes Nazis to create secret armies that acted at least in 15 European countries, members of NATO and non-members of NATO, and it created dozens or more than 100 deaths in Europe, including a bomb attack in the train station in Bologna. So this has been accepted to exist, and that has links to armed organizations like ETA, IRA, Brigate Rosse, and Baader-Meinhof, which were very convenient to create terror and fear of left-wing or terrorism, but it was actually with links with NATO. And as I said, and it's very important here now to quote or to mention Sybil Edmonds, which is the whistleblower that used to be a FBI translator, which has mentioned and outlined the existence of Gladio B, which would be that now that communism is not a threat, but now Islam has become the new threat, and that's why Gladio B could be the explanation to all these false flag attacks that we're seeing in Madrid, London, Manchester, Paris, Brussels, and so on. But we'll go into Gladio deep some other time. But the important part here is that, again, the official version is a lie, because the Basque independence movement had got its best results in European elections just 10 days before the bomb attack. And one of the cities where they had got the best result, it was precisely Barcelona. So why on earth should ETA, after Barcelona had voted in a big number for the representatives of the independence movement in Basque country, want to do a bomb attack in Barcelona? It doesn't have any reasons, and they warned several times and nothing was done about it. So everything is fishy and very different from what they explained to us. But the most definitive thing, and it's something that leaves no space to doubt, especially once we have clarified that Gladio was confirmed only 3 years after that. And on another time also we'll talk about Omagh in Northern Ireland in 1998. And I hope we're going to have some people from Ireland telling us on their investigations about this being a false flag as well. But the most determinant thing in this case is that the Spanish court considers proof, after talking with experts and witnesses, that the explosive used in Hipercor Barcelona 30 years ago was napalm. And napalm is only served to armies belonging to NATO. It's fabricated only by BASF, Dow Chemicals, and a third company, I don't recall now, and it's served to NATO armies. So we have something that is to kill Catalans, which have just voted for you 10 days ago. You warned several times, but the police doesn't do anything about it. and boom, it happens to be with explosives used by NATO. I mean, it looks like a duck, walks like a duck, and quacks. I leave it up to you, but to me, it's flag. The second topic today is Carles Puigdemont. For the people outside Catalonia, you might not know, but Carles Puigdemont has been president of Catalonia for the last year, and most people for independence support him, because most people in the independence movement still haven't realized that referendum don't bring independence. Referendum is the way empires like United States, UK, or old empires like Spain used to murder independence while pretending to be democratic countries, which they are not. So we're gonna about Carles Puigdemont. Carles Puigdemont is by profession a journalist. We won't go today into the extreme or extensive links between journalism and spying or secret agents or secret services. Once we're gonna talk about the report published in Rolling Stone magazine in 1971 by one of the persons behind the Watergate scandal. But let us say that he's a journalist. He started important things like the Catalan Agency of News. He worked in Abu, and he had an extensive career. But the first thing that most Catalans don't know, and it's something that we're going to make public today, and we're going to keep making public till everybody realizes Carles Puigdemont is not the real thing. Carles Puigdemont started a Catalan magazine called Catalonia Today in English in 2004, and he did that with a journalist called Stephen Bergen, which happened to be the correspondent of the Times of Rupert Murdoch back then. Well, as he himself said in a video, he's worked for the devil and for God, and one of them is Murdoch, and he let us know which is which. To a lot of people, Murdoch would be the devil. Well, the important thing is that it happens that Carles Puigdemont is supposed to leave Catalans to independence, but he set up this magazine with somebody like Stephen Bergen, who writes in unionist digital newspapers like Crónica Global, and he's written several years for the Scotsman, which is also not very independentist newspaper. But the most relevant thing, and the thing that every media in Catalonia has hidden from us, and that's why some of us dissidents are in danger. All the media have tried to hide something very relevant, and which is as follows. Stephen Bergen did an article in The Guardian. The Guardian is a newspaper that a lot of people loves, but one day will debunk what The Guardian means, and it's part in some big scams like the WikiLeaks fraud and Chelsea Manning, Bradley Manning, Edward Snowden, Julian Assange, and all these scams and frauds. We're gonna go into it one day to debunk WikiLeaks. But the question today is that Stephen Bergen, the 20th of November of 2012, he published an article that destroys the reputation of himself, of Carles Puigdemont, and of The Guardian forever. Because he made an article saying that Catalan independentists are racist, which is debatable or not true. But the worst thing is that he exemplifies it with Xavier García Albiol, mayor of the city of Barcelona. Well, the big abuse and disrespect for the readers and for the truth is that Xavier García Albiol is a unionist, and yes, he's a racist, a very well-known racist, but he happens to be the most well-known unionist in Catalonia. So it really amounts to genociding feelings or xenophobia against Catalan, and certainly you cannot be a journalist one day more when you change the truth one side to the other and you make him pass as an independentist. Well, that kind of thing of Puigdemont is hidden in Catalonia because there were big plans for him. The next big step for him is in 2007. He becomes candidate to the town hall, to the mayor position in Girona, an important city in Catalonia, but he got candidate there by default because Carles Mascort, which was supposed to be the candidate, he was threatened to death, him and his family. So that left the way to Carles Puigdemont, which happened this peculiar accidental sort of circumstances that have brought him to be president. He finally became mayor in Girona in 2011, and then back in 2015 he became president of the Catalan Association of Towns for Independence. But he became that because the then president quit 4 months in advance, saying that he didn't want to dedicate himself to politics anymore, which is a lie, because then he was in the electoral list after that and he was setting up a new party. So it was a lie again. And Carles Puigdemont becomes president of this association. Then a few months later, 27th of September, we had an elections where they told us that if they got a majority they would declare independence, but again, they lied to us Catalans and they didn't declare independence. But then there was a tug of war for 3 months. Junts pel Sí, which had 62 seats, had to negotiate with CUP, supposedly anti-system left-wing and supposedly independentist, all very supposedly, because we have found different. And after 3 months of shenanigans, and at the last minute, and saved by the bell, Carles Puigdemont gets ushered in as president. But the important thing is that happened only because in this CUP splinter party, this tiny party with 10 seats, they had an assembly, and they say it drew to 1,515 votes to 1,515 votes. I mean, who can believe that 3,000 people exactly draw to force a change in government? I mean, that is rigged. We have spoken with people that were there, and they have told us that it was no draw at all. So that is the truth. Carles Puigdemont is president of Catalonia because somebody was threatened to death, because he set up a newspaper with somebody who's anti-Catalan, and because in very fishy circumstances they put him as a president with the votes of only 36 people in CUP. Then when you realize that he now has invented a referendum that was not there because he was supposed to declare independence, and that he lied to the whole people of Catalonia, saying that he hadn't had a meeting with Mariano Rajoy about independence, and then it came out that he had, this person has been put there by an invisible hand to murder independence, and to murder it through a referendum, because referendums don't bring independence. Now, changing the subject, I'll go very briefly into the term conspiracy theory. Conspiranoic or conspiracy theories is something that normally we get thrown at our head in social media when we're challenging the official truth about things. 9/11, 11th of March, the attacks in Europe, all these things, they have given us some versions that are worse than fairy tales, but we are supposed to believe what mainstream media tell us, because otherwise we're supposed to be conspiracy theorists. Well, it's time once and for all to clarify that not only have studies proven that people labeled conspiracy theorists are better informed, are more intelligent on average than people that tend to accept the official truth, but it's something that is final about this term. Conspiracy theory was a conspiracy. Let's clarify this. The term was invented by the CIA. There are internal memorandums where the CIA decides to create the term to silence people, specifically that happened in the clear case of JF Kennedy being murdered. I mean, the official version is that there was a magic bullet that changed direction 13 times, so there was only one shooter, which was Lee Harvey Oswald. That's far from the truth, we know nowadays. But the CIA, to shut up the people who didn't believe the official version, said, oh, that's one of those conspiracy theories. Well, that was invented by the CIA. So from here, we want to tell people, if you work in some secret services and you're being paid for using the term to silence people, that's okay. It's your job. It's a shitty job. It's a filthy job. It's a job that kills people. but at least you're getting paid for it. But if you're one of the persons that in good faith is repeating the term conspiracy theorist and is using it against people, you have to realize that first, you're doing a job for free, you're being abused and mocked because somebody is using you to say that, and finally, you are collaborating with murdering millions of people there in Iraq, in Afghanistan, everywhere in the world, and also in the bomb attacks in Europe. Because they couldn't murder these people in false flag attacks if there wasn't this movement of thousands or millions of people using the term conspiracy theory to silence the people that are taking risk and finding information about the truth. So please, stop using the term, because conspiracy theorists are the good guys, and people blaming them or labeling them are the bad guys. Okay? And finally, I want to talk about referendums. Referendums don't bring independence. Only UDI will bring independence. And I'm going to make a short summary, and I think it's easy to explain. If you do UDI, there's nothing UK or Canada or Spain can do about it. It's a revolutionary movement, and bang, independence here. But if you do a referendum to a stronger force like the ones we've mentioned, then you're never going to win. And I think it's time for some historic summary of this. In 1938, Hitler invaded Austria, and he confirmed it by doing a referendum that he won. Franco had a 40-year-long dictatorship, but he did referendums twice. Surprisingly, he won twice a referendum. Then in Scotland, you had referendum for devolution in 1979. But they put this law where you needed 40% of the list of the register to vote for yes, though even when more people voted yes than no, dead people voted no, so you lost the referendum. And then you have Greece, where a majority of people decided not to accept the impositions of European Union on austerity, but they had to accept austerity anyways. And then in Ireland 2008, they didn't accept the Treaty of Lisbon, but hey, they had to accept it because they did a second referendum, and whoa, it was accepted. And Holland had a referendum where they didn't want stronger links with Ukraine, but the government had already signed an agreement with the Ukrainians, so they had to put up with it. And so on and so on. But the most relevant ones is something we're going to go into detail, which is the Scottish referendum with no exit polls, tampering with postal votes, blank ballots, wrong things happening with betting, and we'll go into it. And now they're preparing in Catalonia something for the 1st of October. So the question is as follows. No referendum brings independence. They have excluded UDI from the conversations about independence. So people working for having a referendum, they are working for the union. Either they know it or they don't know it. And that's all for tonight. Thanks for being with us in Radio Hadrian, and we'll meet you again next Sunday. Thanks. Guanyarem.
This has been another update from the Catalan Independentist Resistance from Radio Hadrian. Remember that you can follow us on social media, either on Facebook, YouTube, our Twitter account, Instagram, Google, Telegram, and also on iVoox.